Record. I guess it's recording. Go.
All right. This is my granddad, James Jacob, Specialist James Jacoby. I'm gonna interview you.
Okay.
Why did you decide? Sorry, what?
I said it wasn't that funny. I just said okay.
Why did you decide to join the Army?
Well, I didn't really join the Army. I was drafted into the Army.
Oh. How does that work?
Well, they haven't had a draft since 1972, but up until that time, they sent you a letter when you got to, well, when you turned 18 years old, you had to register for the draft. And then if you didn't have some kind of deferment, then you could be drafted into the military services. And then you'd go in and you'd take a physical, and if you passed the physical, you get sworn into the Army.
So all you have to do is just do like a couple of push-ups and know how to like use your eyes, and then.
Well, you just have to pass the physical. You have to be physically fit enough to serve in the military.
All right. My mom said you were stationed in Germany. What did you do there?
Well, when I was originally drafted, I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for 8 weeks of basic training, which everyone goes through. And then I went to 8 weeks of advanced training in Fort Lewis, Washington. And that training for me was infantry training, light weapons infantry. So I learned how to use, well, you learn how to use the rifle in basic training, but then we learned how to use automatic rifles and machine guns and grenade launchers and all kinds of cool stuff at infantry training. And then in May of 1967, I got orders to go to Baumholder, Germany, and join the 68th Armored Regiment. The Armored Regiment is a tank regiment, okay? It's not infantry. So I didn't know why they sent me there, but I had orders, so I went. And when we got there, they said, we don't know what you're doing here either. So they somehow transferred me to the 2nd Battalion, 13th Infantry. So I was just in an infantry unit, and all we did, we were there in case anything bad happened in Europe or in the Middle East or anywhere in that part of the world. There were probably almost as many soldiers in Germany in those days as there is in the entire Army today.
Oh.
We were there as part of the NATO forces. After World War II, Germany was divided into 4 parts. There was East Germany, which was the Soviet Union sector. Then they divided West Germany into 3 sectors, one that was occupied by England, one that was occupied by France, and one that was occupied by the United States. So I was in the United States zone, which was southern Germany. And we were there, they had what they called the Cold War in those days, when we thought that there might be a war with the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries. So we were there to protect and guard Europe.
All right. Was the war hard for you, or were you just a goofy 17 to 20-year-old boy?
Oh, well, I was 19 when I was drafted, and I was 21 when I got out. And it was not difficult once I got to Germany. When I first got there, I actually started working in the supply room. I was a clerk in the supply room. And in February of 1968, I was supposed to go to Vietnam, but I didn't. So they made some changes. When I got back and came back to the infantry company that I was in, then I started working in the company office. We called it the orderly room. So I mostly just did typing and clerical things while I was there.
All right. Well, I learned about the Tet offense, and that you almost got sent to Vietnam. Can you tell me a
Yes.
little bit about that?
Yes, in the end of January of 1968, the Vietnamese army and the Viet Cong in Vietnam attacked all over South Vietnam. They had attacks on many, many cities and military bases all across South Vietnam, which was completely unexpected. The military did not think that they had the resources to do that. And everybody sustained heavy casualties at the beginning, and nobody knew what was going to happen. So right after the Tet Offensive began, it began in most places on January the 30th, and some places on January the 29th, because oddly enough, they have two different calendars in Vietnam, and they didn't coordinate it very well. But when that started, they were scrambling for more soldiers. So the word came down for 10 people in my company. My company was about a little under 200 men. And they sent down orders for 10 of us to pack our bags and get ready to go to Vietnam because they needed help. Okay. So when you do that, there's a lot of things that you have to do before you leave a military base. So they basically give you about a week, and you have to go around and you turn in all your equipment, and you get clearances from the different offices on base, and then you leave. So I did all that, and I cleared, and 10 of us got in a truck, and we went to division headquarters, which was about 30 miles away. And when we got there, the other 9 guys had orders for Vietnam, and I did not. So I've checked around a couple of different places because the Army never knows what's going on in the first place. And finally somebody said, well, you're not going. And I said, why not? And they said, well, we're only taking people that have a year to go, and you only have 11 months. So then I went back to where I was before, and that's, they had given away my job in the supply room, so they found me a different job in the orderly room. And I was there from then on. But it was a very hard time in Vietnam, the Tet Offensive. It lasted several months, and there was a lot of casualties on both sides. And it was really the worst year of the war, 1968. That's when more people were killed than any year of the war. But I didn't go. I stayed in Germany.
So would you describe that as being lucky or unlucky?
Well, I guess in retrospect, it was probably lucky because I was not likely to get killed in Germany, where I could have been in Vietnam. I don't know what happened to the other 9 guys, if any of them got killed. You have to understand, at that time, around that time in Vietnam, there was nearly 500,000 American soldiers, 500,000 American soldiers. But only probably about 10% of those, or 50,000 of those, were actually in the infantry and doing the fighting. Now, it was still dangerous because you could be in a rear base someplace and they could have a mortar attack or a rocket attack or something. But the most dangerous job in the Army is in the infantry, and that's what I was. So I didn't necessarily think I was lucky at the time. When they said I was no longer on the list to go to Vietnam, I said, how do I get back on the list? And they said, you can't. Well, I mean, I didn't really want to go to Vietnam, but I had packed my bags and said goodbye to my friends, and I was ready to go. So today I would say, yes, I was very lucky not to go. Very, very lucky.
How did you feel about the, oh wait, I just asked that. Well, how did you feel about the war back, I mean, now, how do you feel about?
Well, at the time I was supportive. There was a lot of people in the country that weren't. and they really didn't like soldiers. We were not treated very well, some of us, when we came back to this country. But knowing what I know now about the Vietnam War, it was all really just a big, terrible mistake. And 56,000 people died over there for a stupid mistake, basically. I'm sure if everybody had it to do over again, it never would have happened. But it's much easier to see looking back than it is looking forward.
Yep. Were you a hooligan, or were you a lovely little lad in the army?
I was both. When I graduated from basic training, I was promoted from private E1 to private E2, and there was only, in my company, there was probably only 20 of us out of 200 that were promoted. And when I finished the next 8 weeks of training at infantry training, I was promoted to private first class. And there was only a few of us that got promoted to private first class. And then 7 months later, I was promoted to specialist E4. And you had to be at least 6 months as an E3 before you could get promoted to E4. So I was advancing very rapidly, because when I was doing what I was supposed to do, I was pretty good.
You were naturally good at doing war stuff.
Well, some of it is like schoolwork. You have to learn things, and there's some tests that you take. I was always very good at that. It was very easy for me to learn, because let's just say that a lot of the people in the military and especially in the infantry didn't have as much education as I did. So when they taught those people things, it was very, very simplified teaching. Okay, it was like teaching to, I don't know, probably like teaching to 6th graders instead of teaching to adults. So
yeah,
I learned very quickly, and I did very well.
Yeah, I always thought the war training was just like, push up, 500 to go. James, it's 500 to go.
Well, we did a lot of push-ups, and we did a lot of physical training. We were all in very good physical condition, but we also had to learn how to use all the different weapons, and we had to learn about infantry tactics and camouflage and, hand-to-hand combat. There was a lot of training involved. They don't just send you out and give you a rifle and say, go be in the war. They teach you how to do it. I keep telling your Nana that I'm a trained killer, but she laughs at me.
Did the army change your life in any way?
Well, it's hard to say.
This can be a yes or no question.
Well, of course it did. It had to. I mean, it was quite a different experience from what I was used to. It put me in contact with different kinds of people that I never would have met anywhere else. It taught me how to do a lot of things. It gave me a lot of independence. It taught me discipline. So yeah, there were definitely some things that I learned, and it certainly did change my life.
Wow, so is that for the better or for the worse, you would say?
Well, I don't know. Probably for the better, because I think the more experiences we have in life and the more we learn about life, the better off we are. Okay. I will tell you one more incident that happened in August of 1968. The Tet Offensive started in January, and it went probably through the end of March of 1968, but I stayed in Germany, as I said. But in August of 1968, we were doing some training in a place called Grafenwehr, Germany. And Grafenwehr, Germany it's in southern Germany and it's way over on the eastern side. It's very close to what used to be called Czechoslovakia. And in August of 1968, the people in Czechoslovakia were revolting against their communist government. And they were trying to get more freedom like we have in the West. And the Russians actually invaded Czechoslovakia in August of 1968. And we were right there, real close to the border. And we were sure hoping that they stopped when they didn't know if they were going to keep coming into Germany or not. But they didn't. But it was a little bit of a scary time too.
Do you have a story that you think would either be, it could be like humiliating, just a story that is like unforgettable?
Well, I think my experience almost going to Vietnam was probably the most unforgettable story of the period. As I said, we were there in August of 1968. We were actually on a tank gunnery range at the time. That was a little frightening. Right after I got to Germany, in early June of 1967, there was a war in the Middle East called the Six-Day War, when Israel was fighting the Syrians and the Egyptians and the Jordanians, and I don't know who all. But that popped up unexpectedly. And at the time, the unit that I was in, the 2nd Battalion of the 13th Infantry, was prepared to go to the Middle East because nobody knew what was going to happen. We didn't, but we were prepared to go to the Middle East. So there was at least 3 times that I was pretty close to going to war while I was in Germany, but there was never any war in Germany, and I didn't go to Vietnam. So those were certainly the most memorable events to me.
Thank you for your time here.
You're very welcome. Anytime.
I wasn't really thinking of an ending, so bye.
Bye. Is that all you need?
Oh yeah, that's all I need.